Now, how to make page 16 assembly. We're going to need to open yet another part. It's going to be the 4x1 wedge piece, I believe, here. So what we would do, come in. If you hadn't already pre-opened this, what you could end up doing is we're going to go Insert Components. I'm going to browse. If I hadn't opened it already, I would come up a level, and because I have this large icons showing, I could graphically see, this is the part that I'm going to really want to insert into my assembly. If I open this up, hey, it's actually going to drop in. Now we're going to need two of these. I click once, and it's going to drop one part in, and that went away, and if we wanted to, I could insert another component and browse again, and I could add another instance of this. So I've got my 4x1 wedge. I've got two of them in here now because we're going to need two of these to be assembled. Notice that they can move around. What we're going to start with, it's going to be easiest to address this one right here. How I recommend you approach this, we again need to come to our mate, and even before that you're going to notice that if I left mouse button click and drag, I could move this around, but we're going to use mates to place it very precisely. So with nothing selected here, I'm going to go to mate, and I'm going to start with a concentric mate again, and it's going to be between this round boss here. Just selected that with my left mouse button click. And of these two right here, I'm going to select that circular face on the 2x10 brick, and I'm going to click that. And that pulls those together. I like that, how that looks. Okay, but the part came down below where I wanted it. If I hit the green checkmark arrow, you're going to notice that I can click and drag. This is still free to rotate around, which we're going to be fixing here in a moment. And we're going to need to make ultimately the bottom face touch the top face with a coincident mate. But what I'm going to do next here, so I have that concentric mate. What I could do at this point is another concentric mate, and I could pick any of these ones here that I like, but I'm going to do the furthest one away just because it's going to be easiest for me to hear, and then I'm going to count. That was going to be number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. I'm going to make another concentric mate between the 4th and this concentric face right there. And that pulls around and makes those concentric to each other. So now I have lost the ability for this part to rotate in space, but it can still move up and down. Okay. And what we're going to do then is come around to see the bottom. I'm holding down my center mouse button key to orbit so I can see the bottom of this. I'm now going to use a coincident mate. That bottommost edge, or excuse me, face, I just selected that. I'm going to orbit back up, holding down my control key and center mouse button to pan, and I'm going to select this topmost face of the part, of the 2x10 part. And with that, that pulls those together. I do a green check mark, and I have the first of the two now in place. I'm doing a Control 7 to get to my isometric view. Now what I recommend to make things a little bit easier to assemble here with this other one, I'm going to get out of mate mode right now. I'm going to close that. I'm going to right click on that particular part, and I'm going to move with Triad. When I get this here, I'm actually going to rotate around what's considered the y-axis. So I'm clicking and dragging circular to get this pre-positioned to look close to what I want, at least in terms of the orientation of the part. Okay, now we'd have some choices here about how we would want to mate this together. We could do it in exactly the same fashion as before, using a concentric and a concentric to that, a concentric and a concentric to that, and a coincident between the bottom face of this part on here and the top face. Or once these are now placed, we could actually use 3 coincident mates, which is what I'm going to try here and demonstrate this method of doing it. Now we're going to go coincident between this face here and this face here. That pulls those together. I like that. And moving this up. So that's a left mouse button click and hold. What I'm going to do now is a coincident mate between the face, that part, as I orbit around, and this part here. Those are now coincident to each other. Letter F on the keyboard brings those all to the center and in good view. Click green check mark. And as I orbit around, center mouse button orbit, I can do yet another coincident mate to the bottom edge and orbit back up to select the top face of the 2x10. And that now, Control and 7, looks very similar to that assembly on page 16. Once these are assembled together, it's best practice to click on the green check mark OK to get mate, the mate window, the mate function closed out, and you now have page 16 modeled up.